If you have grown up in Germany, the Autobahn teaches you something no American highway ever will. Get onto the right stretch, and there is no number telling you how fast you're allowed to go. Just an advisory speed of 130 kilometers per hour, about 81 miles per hour, which you're free to ignore completely, and roughly 70% of the entire network works exactly this way. And if you have grown up in America, you know that basically none of that applies here, because every single highway has a hard number painted right on a sign. Cameras watch entire cities for anyone who breaks it, and one American city alone runs a camera network large enough to rival entire European countries. Here's the twist, though. One of these two highway systems has a lower rate of fatal crashes per mile driven than the other, and it's probably not the one you're picturing right now. Before we get into it, drop your guess in the comments. Which highway system actually has fewer deaths per mile traveled? The German Autobahn with no speed limit at all on most of it? Or the American interstate system with speed limits, cameras, and enforcement nearly everywhere? Most people get this wrong on the first guess, and the real answer says something surprising about what actually keeps drivers safe. The Autobahn's origin predates almost everything else on the road today, though the idea itself started earlier than most people realize. A private organization began planning a nationwide high-speed road network back in 1926, years before anyone associated with the project we know today came to power. The first completed stretch opened between Frankfurt and Darmstadt in 1935, making it the world's first limited-access, high-speed road network, years before the United States even authorized its own interstate system in 1944. It's worth being direct about the era this happened in. That first stretch opened under Hitler's government, which took over the existing plans and turned the project into a heavily propagandized symbol of German engineering. Construction relied on roughly 120,000 laborers, including forced laborers and Jewish prisoners, and the network grew to about 3,800 kilometers over the following 6 years before the war brought construction to a near standstill. Here's a detail that surprises most people on both sides of the Atlantic. The Autobahn wasn't always free of speed limits. In May 1939, the same government that built it imposed real speed limits, 60 kilometers per hour in towns and 100 kilometers per hour on the open road, after rising accident numbers became impossible to ignore. That November, once the war had started, the limit dropped again to 80 kilometers per hour, purely to conserve fuel for the war effort. After the war, Allied occupation zones each set their own temporary limits. Then, in 1953, the newly formed West Germany abolished speed limits entirely, even inside towns, as part of a broader push to strip away regulations associated with the previous regime. The result was immediate and brutal. Traffic fatalities nearly doubled that year, reaching over 11,000 deaths, up from around 6,300 the year before. Urban limits came back in 1957 and have stayed in place ever since, but the open highway remained unrestricted, setting the stage for the advisory-only system still used today. There's a phrase for this, one that translates to free driving for free citizens, and it's been the rallying cry against speed limits since the 1970s. The slogan was coined in 1974 by Germany's largest motoring organization, one of the biggest automobile clubs in the world, and it stuck. It isn't just a slogan, it reflects a genuine belief that an adult behind the wheel, on a well-built road, in a well-built car, should be trusted to set their own pace, and it shows up in everything from car commercials to political debates about the country's national identity. America took a different path almost immediately, and the two countries' stories collide at exactly the same moment in history. In 1973, the OPEC oil embargo hit both nations at once, and both governments responded by trying to slow everyone down. Germany imposed a temporary 100 kilometers per hour limit that November. The backlash was immediate and furious. By March of 1974, the limit was gone, replaced with the same advisory-only standard still used today. America went a completely different direction. President Nixon signed the National Maximum Speed Law on January 2, 1974, capping every highway in the country at 55 miles per hour. Unlike Germany's 4-month experiment, America's version stuck around for 21 years, enforced the entire time by withholding federal highway funding from any state that refused to comply. It wasn't repealed until 1995, nearly a full generation after the oil crisis that started it had already ended. And here's the part almost nobody outside one specific state remembers. When Congress repealed the national limit in December 1995, Montana reverted to a law it had used before 1974, one that set no numerical speed limit at all during the day. Instead, drivers just had to go a speed considered reasonable and prudent for conditions. Locals nicknamed it the Montana Bun, and state troopers unofficially treated anything under 80 or 90 miles per hour as acceptable. Nighttime driving still had real numbers attached, 65 miles per hour on interstates and 55 on two-lane roads, so this wasn't a total free for all around the clock. It was specifically a daytime experiment, and Montana was the only state in the country running it. A driver named Rudy Stanko became the reason the whole thing eventually collapsed. After getting a citation under the law in March 1996, Stanko fought it all the way up through the courts, arguing that reasonable and prudent was too vague a standard for anyone to actually follow. He told reporters afterward that he'd once asked a police officer how fast he was legally allowed to drive, and the officer couldn't give him a straight answer. That argument is exactly what won. The Montana Supreme Court agreed the law failed to warn drivers when they'd crossed the line into breaking it, which is a basic requirement for any law to hold up. The actual safety numbers from those years are messier than either side of the debate likes to admit. Statewide fatalities bounced around during the 4 years, dropping to 198 in 1996, spiking to 265 in 1997, then falling back to 237 in 1998. Not a clean trend in either direction. But one specific comparison is genuinely striking. In the final 12 months before Montana adopted its fixed 75 mile per hour limit, interstate fatalities hit a modern low of 27. In the 12 months immediately after the fixed limit took effect, that number more than doubled to 56. A Montana Highway Patrol data specialist later cautioned that crash investigators usually can't isolate speed as the main factor anyway, since seatbelt use and alcohol tend to matter more. So this comparison complicates the story, rather than settling it cleanly in either direction. It lasted 4 years. In 1998, Montana's Supreme Court ruled the law unconstitutionally vague in a close 4-3 decision, with 3 justices dissenting and arguing ordinary drivers understood the standard just fine. Montana passed a hard 75 mile per hour limit in 1999, and America has had numerical highway speed limits everywhere ever since. Today, the highest posted limit in the country belongs to Texas, where a stretch of State Highway 130 outside Austin allows 85 miles per hour, the fastest legal speed anywhere in America, though still nowhere close to what a German driver can legally do on an unrestricted stretch of Autobahn. That difference, 4 months versus 21 years versus a brief 4-year American experiment nobody remembers, tells you almost everything about how these two countries think about rules once they're written down. Germany treats speed limits as a temporary intrusion to be undone the moment public pressure demands it. America treats them as policy to be maintained long after the original justification has quietly disappeared, with Montana standing as the one strange exception that proves how uncomfortable most of the country actually is with true open roads. That same instinct shows up today in how heavily America monitors speed, just at a much more local level than most visitors expect. New York City alone operates somewhere around 2,200 to 2,400 speed cameras across 750 school zones, running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week since 2022, as part of the city's Vision Zero initiative, a data-driven program aimed at eliminating all traffic deaths and serious injuries on city streets. That single city's camera network is large enough to rival the entire country of Germany's speed camera count. And the reasoning behind it is deliberately narrow, not general highway enforcement, but protecting kids walking to and from school specifically, which is a much more targeted justification than a blanket nationwide rule. The fine for getting caught is a flat $50, a civil penalty with no license points attached, a world away from the steep, sometimes income-scaled fines used across parts of Europe. It's enforcement built for volume and consistency rather than deterrence through fear of a single massive bill. The honest complication is that neither country is fully at peace with its own approach. A 2021 poll found that 60% of Germans actually support adding a nationwide speed limit, meaning the freedom argument is far from unanimous, even among the people living it every day. Meanwhile, in New York, city officials point to an 8% drop in injuries and fatalities during overnight and weekend hours after the camera program expanded to run around the clock, using that number to argue enforcement genuinely works. Both countries, in other words, are quietly second-guessing the very systems that define them. So which system actually keeps more people alive per mile driven? Multiple independent studies, including Germany's own Federal Highway Research Institute and comparative data from the U.S. Federal Highway Administration, have found that the Autobahn's fatality rate per billion vehicle kilometers driven consistently comes in lower than the equivalent rate on American highways, despite having no legal cap on most of its network. The exact numbers shift depending on the year and the source, but the direction of the gap holds up again and again. Having no speed limit doesn't automatically mean more death on the road, and that finding complicates the assumption almost everyone walks in with. It's worth being honest that this comparison isn't perfectly clean. Germany's roads are newer, its cars are often better maintained, and subject to mandatory, rigorous vehicle safety inspections that would ground a lot of cars currently rolling on American interstates. Drivers there also go through stricter, more expensive licensing before they're ever allowed behind the wheel, a process averaging around 3,000 euros and requiring mandatory highway and night driving lessons most American drivers never have to complete. There's also a strict keep right law, a rule that requires drivers to stay in the rightmost available lane except when actively overtaking, which is strictly observed on the Autobahn and is a big part of why high-speed mixed traffic flows as safely as it does. Freedom on the Autobahn comes wrapped in a lot of infrastructure and training most American drivers never have to earn. So the lower fatality rate isn't proof that removing speed limits makes roads safer on its own. It's evidence that an entire system built around trust, discipline, and serious driver education can produce results that surprise people who assume rules are the only thing standing between order and chaos. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you think America should trust its drivers the way Germany does? Or do you think the rules, the cameras, and the enforcement are exactly what's keeping American roads as safe as they are? And if you're German, does the idea of a speed camera on every corner sound like safety to you, or something closer to surveillance? Drop it in the comments, because this is one of those topics where both sides have genuinely good reasons for believing what they believe. If you liked this video, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because the culture clash between Europe and America never stops being fascinating. And always remember, whether you are European or American, the culture clash between our two worlds never gets old. I'll see you on the next one.